Balveen, thank you so much for joining me today. I want to start with your story, and if you could just tell us a little bit about your experience and your career trajectory so far.
Thanks for having me, Tarla. It's a great pleasure to be here. Look, I've had a fairly varied career and I've been lucky to work both in the private sector and not-for-profit sector. I started my career as a corporate lawyer in London and from there moved into various strategy and business development roles. And I've found that I was much better at that business side of industry than I was as a lawyer, and gradually wanted to move and offer my services to not-for-profit and the community sector. So I set up my own business when I moved to Brisbane and gradually got to know people working in community-facing enterprise. And my passion has really always been about making sure that we work across sectors to address common issues that exist in our community, and particularly for my case, with a focus on ensuring women have access and information to really achieve their potential. So I've been privileged to work in a number of roles, and my latest role, or my current role with the Cancer Council, really gives me that ability to use my old skills from law, private equity, business development, and look at healthcare for women with a different lens.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to now shift into your story. And so you were diagnosed with endometriosis when you were 21 years old. When did you start to feel that the pain you were feeling on a regular basis was abnormal to just period pains? I can imagine having to navigate that through your teenage years wouldn't have been easy.
Well, I was lucky in that my mother had endometriosis, so we had some of that vocabulary and knowledge within our family. So growing up, I was aware that she obviously suffered consistently with very heavy periods and extreme pain, and was receiving treatment at the time. So as a child and as a teenager, that was part of our family experience. It still took a number of years, though, before that link to my symptoms became obvious. I think there was probably a lack of information about how young endometriosis can impact on girls and young women. So my mother probably, and I think at the time, didn't equate my symptoms with hers because in her information set that she received or had access to at the time, endometriosis was something that only impacted mature women or perhaps women of childbearing age, whereas as a young girl, aged 11, when I first got my period, she probably wouldn't have put those symptoms down to a similar condition. So from 11, really, I had very heavy and painful periods, and like many girls. Probably didn't talk at that stage around what I was experiencing, and that's been one of the greatest drivers for me in joining Endometriosis Australia, is just to normalise discussion about what it means to have a period. What is normal? What isn't normal? There's still a great expectation, I think, that women do and should experience pain, and that pain is normal, and that debilitating pain is normal and just part and parcel of being a girl or a woman, and that is not true. So, encouraging those conversations early is one of my greatest parts of my commitment to Endometriosis Australia. But personally, that only became an issue when I was in my late teens and then early 20s, and that, I guess, had the ability to advocate for my own health and my symptoms more independently. And that's when I first saw a gynecologist and had those conversations, and the diagnosis was made.
Mm, mm. Um, you wrote a piece for SBS noting how your cultural upbringing, being raised in a conservative Indian household, factored into your lack of knowledge around endometriosis. And despite your own mother having also been diagnosed with the same disease, it was still quite a taboo topic to talk about. How did you end up educating yourself further about endometriosis? And is it still a controversial conversation within your family?
I think the taboo comes around not specifically endometriosis as a condition, but any open discussion about gynecological and women's health. And I think that's the intersection that's really difficult for women and girls who have any significant issues with reproductive health, with women's health, that there's always this level of cultural interplay that comes over the top, which clouds discussion about particular conditions. Now, I have a young daughter, she's 8.5. My hope with her is that her health is her primary responsibility and concern. Whether or not that involves discussion about particular diseases or particular conditions is almost secondary, but to be able to discuss on an open basis what contributes to well-being, mental health, positive and constructive discussions about agency and commitment to a girl and a woman's own mental and physical health is where we need to start. When a condition becomes prevalent, then it makes it just so much easier to have those conversations in a safe and constructive environment. So in my family, it was the first bit that never really happened. We didn't talk about what a healthy body looked like, what was healthy sexuality, what was healthy in sexual relationships, let alone what might impact on that from a particular condition. And I think that's true of a lot of families, regardless of cultural heritage, but cultural differences can often play into that conversation. So I really think it's important to get back down to the very basics of what a healthy female body does and how that should be part of our normal conversation in a very open, non-judgmental, factual way, so that if conditions arise that are not normal, those conversations can also be had from a point of strength, not from a point of weakness.
Do you reflect on how challenging that must have been for your mum in navigating the same condition without that support that, you know, you were able to access?
Absolutely. I think a generation back and you know 2 generations ago, those conversations would have been really difficult, both from a basis of not just social stigma, but from incorrect facts around fertility, around femininity, around what it means to be a healthy and productive woman. Because the endometriosis diagnosis has certain connotations around fertility, not all of which are true. I think that's another layer of you know, misconception or skews the conversation really for women in openly talking about women's health. I know that 2 of my older aunties on my dad's side died from ovarian and cervical cancer, but their own families didn't know about their symptoms until way too late. So again, endometriosis is something that's impacted me personally, and that's something I'm really passionate about. But being able to discuss symptoms, treatments, and women's health on a daily basis really helps us to have those conversations across a whole range of conditions.
Are you more candid with your mum and parents now around what you know, what you experience, what your daughter might experience?
I'm much more candid with my own children. I've got 2 boys as well. I think that discussion is just normal. I mean, how our bodies work, how their bodies work, facts is pretty. We're very open. I'm very open with my kids. I watched a movie which is a documentary stroke real story about a family in India, and the husband in that scenario realized his wife didn't have access to good sanitary care. So he sat around trying to develop a low cost, sustainable solution to giving her clean and hygienic sanitary wear. And that's a fascinating story. It's based on a true story. And the boys asked me about it, and we had a great conversation about what that looks like in that culture. So it's coming out of this bubble of women's health into just what does it mean to have a different body, and what happens to your body at different points of your life, and doing that in a way that's not covered in shame. It's not overly sexualized. It doesn't need to come from a position of illness. It's just about being normal.
Yeah. In your experience, how can we better address intersectionality in women's health?
I think we have to listen to women, and I think we have to start believing them and their experiences. And I think that doesn't just come under the banner of women's health. That's a whole range of issues that impact predominantly on women, whether it's women's health, whether it's their experience of bias in the workforce, whether it's domestic and family violence. I think the stigmas against believing women are embedded in many of our systems that are designed to respond to women, and therefore our institutions and our policies are often based on facts, or rather rather not based on facts, they're based on assumptions about what women say and why they say it. So particularly issues around chronic pain, pelvic pain, issues with sex, issues with women's experience of sex, and also then in relationships and around coercive control and violence. It's very complex. It's not linear, but all of it starts with actually listening and believing in what women are experiencing. And I still think that that's the biggest hurdle that some of our health systems, practitioners, and then looking across social workers, the police are still grappling with.